School of Art. I'm Holly Greenberg, and I'm really excited about tonight's lecture by our guest, Maria Gaspar, who is coming to us live from downtown Chicago. Do we have any Chicagoans in the audience tonight? I know we've got second year Skylar who hails from Chicago. Anyone else in there, please come find me at some point when we are back live in person and I'll wax poetic about your great city. Okay, without further ado, I'm gonna hand the mic over to Castles, who will provide, no doubt, a beautiful introduction to our guest this evening. Castles, take it away.
Thank you so much, Holly. Hello, everybody. My name is Castles. My pronouns are he, him, or they, them. I, alongside fellow visual artist Rafa Esparza, am the co-founder of In Plain Sight, an 80-artist deep coalition dedicated to abolishing ICE and the culture of incarceration. Today, I am honored to introduce In Plain Sight's featured artist of the week in this SU Visiting Artist series, Maria Gaspar. So as you all know, a lot has gone on in the past couple of weeks recently. The unjust death of Breonna Taylor, no charges were announced against the other two officers who fired shots, and no one was charged for causing the death of Ms. Taylor. There was a supposed presidential debate, stripped of all decorum, resembling moreover a food fight waged by a 12-year-old brat. This week news broke that our sitting president has gotten away with paying less taxes than probably any of us do. Elections have been falsely, by the post office, have been falsely undermined, calling into question the very fabric of how our democracy can function during the time of a pandemic. And to top it off, 45 refused to publicly denounce white supremacy, telling the Proud Boys and a far-right armed militia faction to, quote, stand down and stand by. And so how do we create in the face of such chaos? How do we speak out? How do we contribute creatively? And how do we put movement in our movement? How can we resist stagnation and paralysis? In the midst of this, I turned gratefully to a reading that was assigned to Jess Posner in my class this week by esteemed visiting artist Maria Gaspar. The writing is titled The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action, and was written by the late, supremely talented Black lesbian poet, Audre Lorde. In 1978, she prophetically advised, quote, "In the cause of silence, each of us draws the face of her own fear, of contempt, fear of censorship or some judgment, of recognition, of challenge, of annihilation. But most of all, I think we fear the visibility without which we cannot truly live. Within this country where racial difference creates a constant, if unspoken, distorted vision, Black women have on one hand always been highly visible, and so on the other hand been rendered invisible through the depersonalization of racism. Even within the women's movement, we have had to fight, and still do, for that very visibility, which also renders us vulnerable in our Blackness. For to survive in the mouth of this dragon that we all call America, we had to learn first this most vital lesson, that we were never meant to survive, not as human beings, and neither were most of you here today, Black or not. And that visibility which makes us most vulnerable is also the source of our greatest strength. Because the machinery that will try to grind you into the dust anyways, whether you choose to speak or not. We can sit in our corners, mute forever, while our sisters and ourselves are wasted, while our children are distorted and destroyed, while our earth is poisoned. We can sit in our safe corners, mute as bottles, and we will still not be less afraid. Maria Gaspar is never silent. She is the opposite of silent. Working as an artist in an activist tradition, she asks important questions such as, can art help people rethink incarceration? Maria does not attempt to speak for the voiceless, but moreover works alongside community members to produce alternative narratives tied to, for example, mass incarceration of Chicago's Cook County Jail. These narratives counter preconceived notions of incarceration and provoke discussions around systems of power and geography. Drawn to issues such as displacement and immobility of incarcerated individuals, Gaspar works closely with audio and visuals to create spaces of both visibility in both her personal and community-based practices. Often working outside of the studio, Gaspar improvises and devises creative meeting spaces for her projects in churches, empty storefronts, and backyards. Gaspar's projects have been supported by the Art for Justice Fund, the Robert Rauschenberg Artist as Activist Fellowship, the Creative Capital Award, the Joan Mitchell Emerging Artists Awards, and the Art Matters Foundation. Gaspar has lectured and exhibited extensively at venues including the Contemporary Arts Museum in Houston, Jack Shaman Gallery in New York, Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, the African American Museum in Philadelphia, and the Institute of Contemporary Arts in Los Angeles. She's a professor at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and holds an MFA in Studio Arts from the University of Illinois in Chicago and a BFA from the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York. And we are so grateful to have you here today, Maria. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Castles, for that beautiful introduction. You know, Castles is someone who I've been friends with and colleagues with the last couple of years, and I'm just so honored to have been able to continue that relationship, especially through the project that they and Rafa put together a couple of months ago, which I'll speak to towards the end of the presentation. Thank you, Syracuse. Thank you, Holly and Jess, for organizing and for having me. So I'm gonna start by sharing some images, and I included a couple of videos, and you know, whenever I speak to a group of students, I try to be really generous in my presentation, because I understand that this is a moment where you are, you know, evaluating your practice, thinking about meaning and making, and experimenting with your work. So I'm happy to be a resource to you today and happy to answer any questions or take any comments at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my presentation here. And okay, can you all see this image? Okay. So as Castles mentioned, I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I've been based in Chicago for most of my life. I began making art mostly with my family as a really young kid. And I talk a lot about that because it was a really foundational part of my life and thinking about performance and community and love. Bell Hooks, in her book, All About Love, New Visions, says, the love we make in community stays with us wherever we go. I can't see the rest of the text because of the screens here. With this knowledge as our guide, we make any place a place where we return to love. Chicago is a really vital city that is one of the largest Latinx communities in the United States. I grew up in an area of Chicago called La Villita, or Little Village, which is located on Chicago's west side. It's predominantly made up of Mexicans and Mexican American immigrants. I am a first generation Mexican immigrant. It's the kind of place where people have had an entrepreneurial spirit, opening mom and pop shops, local grocery stores and quinceañera shops. We are also the site of one of the largest Mexican Independence Day parades in the US. It's the kind of place where people come together through activism and organizing to create programming and support cultural events for community members and youth. And some of this practice is rooted for me personally because my grandfather and my uncle were part of a very lively mariachi band in Chicago, offering, you know, music to neighbors and friends for all kinds of festivities. At the same time, my mother was a radio disc jockey when she wasn't a teaching assistant at a public school, and she created free radio programming, mostly for Spanish speakers, especially for women, where she would read poetry in Spanish or provide health information for Latinx people. Little Village has always been a target of people like ICE and law enforcement. As Castles mentioned, the threat of immigrants in this country has always been interpreted as a threat, as a a targeted group of people, and 26th Street has really been a marker of some of those ICE raids. Growing up, it was common to hear about ICE coming in and entering a shop or going to the local mega mall and arresting people. And so community members have always worked really hard to kind of organize and really put attention towards the unjust practices of ICE. When I was a kid in 1993, I was interviewed by the local newspaper, and I remember saying when I was interviewed about gang violence in my neighborhood, I remember saying, why can't I do stuff like all my friends in the suburbs? I was a 7th grader at the time at my Catholic school, and I recall my mother not letting me get on the bus to go to the local mall because it was too dangerous. And for me, this idea of spatial justice, or thinking about geography and place, who belongs and who doesn't, has always been a large part of my consciousness. I really grew up thinking about equity and the way in which certain neighborhoods just had more resources than others, the way law enforcement was more present in some neighborhoods as opposed to others. And as I sort of moved through my own city, I began to really think about my role within the city and what I can do about some of those issues. So I started looking at different kinds of locations around the city. Cook County Jail was one of those sites. And I've done a lot of work about kind of thinking about the body in relationship to places of power. These are studies of Cook County Jail via Google Earth. I was touring Google Earth and taking screenshots of some of the scenes that I saw via that platform. But I've also done projects where I've created installations in various parts of Chicago, thinking about the history of that place and the ways that public memory kind of functions. I've spent some time thinking about historical murals and other kinds of sites that have or hold a special kind of narrative to a group of residents. In the series, I was attempting to insert my body into a mural and kind of consider my own body within this historical and community-based image. For many years, I've worked with young people, sometimes across barriers like gang territory or racial divides. And I created a project called City as Site, where a group of Black and Latinx youth really used our local neighborhood as a kind of site to create these performance interventions, using the parking lot, for example, of a local high school as a kind of performance stage. So through some of these works, I started to really think about how the largest jail, or the largest architecture of my neighborhood, is a jail, and what that meant. And I was also looking at other communities in other parts of the country and the way that a neighborhood lived in proximity to a place of detention. This is a project in New Haven, Connecticut called Sounds for Liberation, where I set up a sound installation and community interviews between those that were incarcerated inside New Haven Correctional and the neighbors that lived around the site. And I collaborated with about 10 high school youth that lived in the area. So I'm going to focus on Cook County Jail right now. Cook County Jail is the largest single site jail in the country. At the time that I started doing this project in 2012, there were about 10,000 people locked up inside the jail on any given day. If anybody is familiar with Chicago, then if you look at this map, you'll see that the jail is located on the kind of most western part of the city of Chicago. So it's, pretty much dead center of this, urban metropolis. It takes up 96 acres of space, which is the equivalent to about 74 American football fields. When I began thinking about what it meant to have the largest architecture of your neighborhood be a jail, I started to think about the ways in which people see the detention center. So I grew up a few blocks away from the jail. I visited the jail as part of the Scared Straight program when I was around 12 years old. So I was familiar with both the inside and the outside. And I wanted to sort of see the way in which people view this institution. And I began to look at the work of Toni Morrison and thinking about invisibility and visibility, the ways in which certain aspects of our world, be that people or institutions or buildings or places of power, can be made invisible. But at the same time, their absences are stressed or so ornate, as Toni Morrison says, that you know, certain parts of neighborhoods, for example, can be defined by the people held away from them. And I very much, you know, that very much resonated with me when I was thinking about the 10,000 people that were locked up inside Cook County Jail waiting for trial. Of course, as we know, really disproportionately made up of Black and Latinx people. I also documented the ways in which the community held just local events around the site. So this is the Mexican Independence Day that, since I was a child, has been setting up floats directly next to sort of the oldest part of the jail, that's Division 1. Or the way that the community would organize a local cultural event with, you know, giant, you know, games and other kinds of carnival rides, sort of juxtaposed right against the windows of one of the oldest parts of the jail. So through some of these studies, I also spent so much time really thinking about this wall, thinking about a border division, the way in which these walls are rigid and static. And I wanted to really think about ways that art can make those spaces porous or malleable, the way that we can imagine them disappearing, abolishing, making them totally transformed even. So I started to experiment with installations and creating these high resolution kind of prints of the wall via fabric, like this curtain that was movable on a curtain track system, so that when the viewer came up to the installation, they can decide to remove the wall by moving it across the track, or someone might want to keep the wall up, so that this wall is really embodied and that the viewer can really contend with that space. I also started to integrate some of the work that I was doing inside of the jail and placing it inside of these installations, again, really reflecting on the wall itself. This is a piece from a couple of years ago where I took audio from the work I'd been doing with some people incarcerated at the jail between 2017 and 18, where they had personified aspects of the jail, and I used sound transducers to kind of move the sound through the wall. I'll show you a little clip of that.
As I watch myself look back, I realize that I don't know who I am anymore. What have I become? I see the ghost of me instead of me.
For the Chicago Architectural Biennial, I installed a 1-to-1 scale print of part of the Cook County Jail into the Chicago Cultural Center, which originally was Chicago's first library. And it was viewable from this very large window. And some people knew that it was the jail and others didn't. And they were sort of confronted with this border wall. And I was hoping that, you know, they would really consider what this wall meant, but also where this wall might be placed or where it exists in different kinds of contexts, whether it be Chicago or the US-Mexico border or between Israel-Palestine. And to, again, think about these divisions as places that can be contended with and even made porous. So I began a project called 96 Acres Project, which ran for a couple of years. And it was started under the premise that a group of artists and organizers, teachers and activists would really come together and think about what it would look like to create a series of artistic interventions at and around Cook County Jail. So if you're not familiar with incarceration or mass incarceration, I'd love to point you to this resource called Million Dollar Blocks. And Million Dollar Blocks is a project by a couple of scholars and researchers that began to do studies of different cities across the country to really look at the way in which money is put into these various neighborhoods, primarily to incarcerate people. That the money that we're spending in a place like Austin, for example, here in Chicago, the state spends $550 million to incarcerate people in just this one community. And their proposition is, what if we took that $550 million and instead of spending it towards incarceration, what would it look like to fund community programming, economic support, other kinds of entrepreneurial programs for people in a community? So really kind of thinking about the ways in which racism, poverty, lack of access to healthcare, et cetera, is, and other kind of systems that are highly racialized affect people in low-income neighborhoods or historically marginalized communities. And again, I'm coming at this from an artist perspective, and really thinking about, upon entering a project like this, what tools do I need and how do I educate myself on the topic of mass incarceration? Although I've been adjacent to it, I've been in proximity to it as a resident, as somebody who has experienced, racial injustice and who has experienced police violence within my community. What kinds of information do I need to really think about what a project can look like? So these are some of the collaborators on this project that I started working with. And I won't go too deep into this particular project, but all of our work is on the 96acres.org website or on my website if you are interested in seeing some of the artistic interventions. But we worked with youth to create a series of stencils that were then power washed onto the jail wall. We made projections. We did lots of audio work that was then shared with different educational spaces and exhibitions. So in 2018, I decided that what I felt like was needed as a sort of next step was to really think about working with people inside of Cook County Jail. I had been working predominantly with people that were on the outside of the institution, who cared about mass incarceration, who were affected by mass incarceration, but not people that were currently inside of the detention center. So Radioactive Stories from Beyond the Wall became a project that really opened up this opportunity to work with folks that were incarcerated. So me and another colleague, Michael Danda Muniz, taught and led a series of workshops inside one of the divisions at Cook County Jail, where we worked with about 20 incarcerated men, AKA the Radioactive Ensemble. And we, spent about 1 year working with two groups of people. And at the very end of the project, we projected and broadcast a series of animations onto the Cook County Jail wall. And it included, original audio recorded inside of the jail that the ensemble produced, drawings that were then animated with a videographer, an animator in post-production. And then all of the work was broadcast to a local radio station and live on site across from the jail. So many people came and watched the installation from across the street of the institution. So I'll kind of walk you through some of the projects that we were involved in.
Gingerbread. Get back in the hole. I like him right there. Jordan, the picture. We gonna do the picture. And you part of the good monster that's representing. You know what I'm saying? See, you gotta have a balance. You got the good, And then you got the back.
You know, you have like joint 4, then you have West Care, like different parts of the digestion.
Makes different
which
parts of the
reform
machine.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Okay, and
We
then
came up with what we want to do is something to do with like a checkerboard. We want to do like a timeline. Like we want to start to finish, kind of like how they.
So all of you are working separately. What connects all of you together then?
that it's all structured.
Okay.
And like DOC inmate walking in.
And the machine digests them through the system almost and gets lost through the system and the belly of the beast, kind of like a catacomb.
We're in the city. They don't want it to be a sort of people's eyes, so they put a wall there instead.
Good job, guys. Good job, Ali.
What? I like working out? What?
So what you just saw is just a little excerpt from what our workshops look like. And so sometimes they included drawing, talking about contemporary art. I would bring in artists' work to look at, like the work of Doris Salcedo, for example, who manages to make really potent, powerful, poetic work about traumatic experiences. We looked at poetry, and we talked about metaphor, and we really spent a lot of time thinking about how the wall can be a kind of amplifier. If the wall was a microphone, what would it say? So then we decided that what we wanted to do was to really personify aspects of the jail, the interior parts. So for example, Douglas did a drawing of a mirror inside of the jail that was made foggy over time. And he talked about being unable to see his face, and he felt like a ghost. And so he wrote a piece about that experience and also did a series of drawings that were then eventually animated. Avery Gordon, in her book Ghostly Matters, talks about ghost stories. And I think a lot about how, places of power that are oppressive and that seek to really confine people and restrict them are places that are haunted, that they evoke a sense of ghostliness and trauma. And so she talks about how these stories that deal with who's excluded and who's invisible is kind of like telling a ghost story. And that really resonated with me, and that resonated with the group. And we spent a lot of time thinking about how, personifying this jail is like telling a kind of ghost story. And that's sort of what aesthetically, what kind of started to shape the project. This is a piece by Spencer, who was this like wicked mark maker, just spending so much time making every line. Every little triangle in that barbed wire was done with so much attention and detail. We created speculative drawings, just spending time kind of imagining what we can do, and really in a way kind of throwing away any idea that we couldn't do something, just really kind of going there. And this is one of my favorite pieces. It's it really makes these spaces become abstract, and other people from the ensemble were interested in creating figurative work, thinking about narratives and storytelling, and really just describing how they felt about the place. Oh, sorry. Oops, sorry about that. Let me go back because I want to show you that video. I'll just contextualize that video. So the video that I'll show you in a moment is a workshop where we used some of the performance exercises of Augusto Boal's Theater of the Oppressed. And we use a lot of those exercises at every start of our workshop as a way to kind of center ourselves, to laugh, to play, to be experimental. And that was really important to us, that although we were talking about things that were, often really hard to talk about, that there were also these other opportunities to kind of get to something softer or something playful or something much more joyful. Okay, here we go.
We're super excited to have this opportunity to share the work with all of you.
Let this thought collide with your beliefs. My name is 201725-165, and I have 226 bones in my body, same as you.
I gave up on life for a minute. I gave up on life, and honestly, being able to go do some art really gave me an idea that I want to live, you know, and breathe.
I want you to take some deep breaths. Do you need a partner? Who needs a partner? Okay, eye contact. So I want you to try to do this in silence, and I want you to imagine that there's a couple of strings connecting from your eyes to their eyes.
Big personalness, like the closer I got, the more I felt it was a mirror that I was looking at myself.
You just hijacked my words. Yep.
I want you to imagine you got hydraulics in your knees. You're bouncy.
My hydraulic rusty.
And then 1, 2, 1, 2. Oh, I see what you were saying.
I don't know if you all are fans of Chicago house music, but this group was very much fans of Chicago house music. So as we were working, I was also planning on the back end what the installation would look like and how people would come to the site. So these are just sort of some sketches of how I was going to turn this vacant lot that was privately owned into a space where people can listen and watch the animations from across the street.
Being like safety. And so I wanted to just kind of clarify those things today and make sure we're on the same page.
For the individuals who are doing the audio, is a picture of them doing the audio, or are you just going to hear the audio and see the art?
Yes, just hear the audio. Okay. So some of them are more emotionally driven. Some of them use humor. Part of what we're trying to do, and I think what we try to do for all these different projects, is to really inform and educate the public about the real complexities of people's lives.
While someone's memoir is powerful and it's important, I just don't want it to be like a bashing of Cook County Jail.
There were things about the entire institution, about criminal justice that they had issues with, but it didn't necessarily call out, you know, the sheriff or anybody.
I just want to look at like security, how things are going to flow on the day of, just to make sure that it goes off safely, that we've checked all the boxes to make sure that we're in compliance with all the Chicago rules.
We want to use 4 projectors and use, if you look at the back side, 10, 9, 8. Sound engineer to make the sound.
Oh, that's what I'm excited about.
It moves. Where it go?
I've been asking the subtle urge to purge and expound on 96. The chill's brisk, speech with the list because my front tooth's chipped. But I must bring you out of your comfort zone as I brought me to this microphone with literature off the dome. I feel heavenly at home in the land of 96 acres. I sought myself and found my savior. I savored that flavor, that now and later. Cut.
Wow.
This is WLPN LP Chicago, 105.5 FM.
So what you saw there is a meeting with the Sheriff's Department because, you know, we decided to project, projectors onto the wall. We just needed the, permission to be able to do that. You know, there was always some tense moments with the sheriff's department. And I wanted to share that little clip with you because I think that's a good kind of moment where, you know, the air is thick. So some of the ensemble members were released shortly after we finished producing the work on the inside. And so this is one of our meetups post Radioactive inside the jail. And we started working on post-production together. So these are some of the members that met up to kind of think about how we were going to curate all these drawings. We had so much content, and then the next task was to figure out what that narrative would look like and how it would sort of roll out. One of the ensemble members, we found out, because his voice was so beautiful and strong and wonderful during our recording, we found out that he had a former life as a radio DJ. So he was, you know, released and was really excited to be able to do some of the voiceover for the final project. So this is him at a sound studio doing the voiceover. We also had opportunities to talk about the work on, you know, local radio programs, and, you know, you know, a major part of the work is that anybody who was part of it, especially the radio ensemble, that they be able to speak about their experience from their own point of view, and they could really speak on their own behalf. And they were really excited to participate in sharing their work with the larger public. Some of the members went on to performing for other events. This is Frederick, who's a really talented spoken word artist who ended up performing at another event in Chicago. You know, sometimes people ask me, you know, how do you know that your project is successful? You know, how do you evaluate it? You know, and I always say, like, there is no measurement, you know, there's no scale system. It's really about relationships, and, you know, I think it's about kinship. You know, it's the kinship that you create with others, and the friendship that you make. And we certainly have had friendships after the program. So the project looked like this at the end, a series of projectors that were animating about a 30-minute piece that was then looping for several times throughout a couple of evenings. So a lot of people just brought their chairs and set up, brought snacks, and watched, you know, neighbors and people from other parts of Chicago. It took place during the Mexican Independence Day parade. For some reason, you know, Chicago is really, you know, you can only do sort of public artwork during the summer and a little bit of the fall. So that's really like the only moment you can do this without it being so cold. So it just somehow it sort of just fell in September again. And so you had this juxtaposition between, you know, these images on the jail wall, and then, you know, these, you know, Mexican flags sort of rolling through. So to me, it really represented, again, this kind of the way in which a community coexists with a place of detention, right? That it is messy, it is unclear sometimes, it is butting up against each other, and to me that was a really strong representation this evening. And then I have one more video, I think, that I'll show you where it captures the final project. Some more drawings. Herb wrote, essentially what he did is he wanted to write an apology letter to his family, and each of them was dedicated to his mother, his sister, and his brother. And he wrote a short apology to each of them, and just wanted it to be presented large so that if they could attend, they could see it. I also invited a local artist to come and create kind of pieces that people can take away. And so people made abolished prison posters and screen printed on site. And this was really great, especially for, you know, people who wanted to learn more and they were, you know, talking about the project and talking about these posters together with the artist. People from the Radioactive Ensemble also brought their families. This is Alex and his mom, and, you know, it was a way to try to also make amends in some cases. Here's the final project.
They incarcerate the body, but they also incarcerate the mind. They shut the mind down, which I think is not a rehabilitative process.
P.S. A window with a soul. But one thing that is for certain is that I have definitely seen it all. Do you see me, or do you just look past my pain?
I talked about my experience while I was incarcerated and giving people a chance, you know, just letting them see what the people on the inside on their day-to-day on what they grow through and their experiences.
It's time to break it off, leaving slowly, every day, cause you're our cheap and weak mistress. Flora, if this room can talk, Mr.
Scratches that they were cooking in a five-star restaurant. Ingredients straight from the commissary list. Using stuff like tuna, ramen noodles, summer sausage, cheese, hot peppers, chili, onions.
It's designed to make you feel like you're nothing. It's really designed to make you feel like you're worthless.
The most traumatic event in my life would have to be at an early age.
To be exempt for manifestation and glorification.
When those images were projected onto the wall, I was able to see it in a whole new way. I was able to see inside without actually having to go inside. I was able to see what people are thinking about, what stories they're telling, where they've been, who they are.
It's huge, it's a barrier, it's heavy, the material is cement. You can really see what's behind the wall. It's something that separates two worlds.
To the light by me, and worst of worst, when it's dark, cousin me.
So this is some of the Radioactive ensemble. We were, really proud that we were able to debut the project. Some of the ensemble members told me, we didn't know that it would really happen. They said we wanted to be part of this project when we were incarcerated, but we didn't really know if it was going to come to fruition. And made me really think that there's a lot of promises made. And that it really meant a lot to really see a project through, completely, and that there could be a sense of pride in all that work that went into it. So I know that we're about at time, but I'll just sort of run through a couple of things. There's a artist book that I made that kind of represents all of the different projects at Cook County Jail the last 8 years or so, called Feedback. And there's a record and various writers who contributed essays to the artist book. Some of the drawings you'll see Doug's drawing is again there, and their poetry and things like that. So I want to shift over and just share with you the project I did for In Plain Sight. Castles and Rafa, when they invited me, were interested in inviting me to do a project at the Coastal Bend Detention Center, which is in Robstown, Texas, not too far from Corpus Christi. And I knew that I couldn't be there. And so I really had to do some research and think about what the community is like, and think about what would be the most effective phrase or text to skytype above this immigrant detention center. And so these are just some pictures of Robstown, Texas. A local photographer went out and took some pictures for me just to kind of get a sense of what the neighborhood kind of looked like. I also added here a map so you can see kind of Corpus Christi and Robstown at the top right, and then you can see the US-Mexico border there. Robstown also has a history of having labor camps. This is an image from, I believe, 1940, of a labor camp that existed there. And it's not heavily populated, but there are many, Mexican and other Latino communities there, residing there. So I had to really take that into consideration. I had initially, when I was thinking about a message, I thought, I want the message to be directed towards law enforcement. But then after our meetup, we had a meeting earlier in February, it occurred to me that what was most important is that the message be directed to those incarcerated and to those around the community that are Spanish speakers. So I was thinking about musicians and artists, singers who have made really important, music in Latin America. And I immediately thought of Mercedes Sosa, who is, a really famous musician. And one of her most beautiful songs is called Soy Pan, Soy Paz, Soy Más, which translates into I am bread, I am peace, I am more. And her lyrics are quite beautiful. She says things like, I am water, I am the beach, I am the sky, I am house, I am plant. I was a child, I was a crib, I was a breast, I was, a manta, like a piece of fabric over a table. And so to me, it really kind of represented this idea that this feeling of being human, right? Of really understanding that these are human beings that are being, unjustly placed in detention for just trying to have a better life, right? And that it is very unjust and cruel, that it is truly a cruel punishment. And so I decided that my text would be soy paz, soy más. So I am peace, I am more. So this is how the project looked on site, captured by a local photographer. It was really an incredible experience to be part of such a national project, but also, I was really grateful towards the artists for, making sure that they were also connecting with people on the ground, that they were connecting with local organizations that have been doing this work, and that something like this could kind of amplify the work they're already doing so that it's really a contribution. And so that was something I was really, truly proud to be a part of. And then this is a little video of the project as it was written in the sky, and it was super hot that day. So, the photographer was just out there waiting because it was sort of hard to tell that the letters would actually come in really fast. It was a really speedy process, kind of incredible. So I'm gonna end there. Thank you so much for listening to me talk. I'm happy to answer any questions and have a conversation with you. Thank you.
Maria, fantastic. Thank you so much. I am going to ask everyone to start putting their questions in the chat. And then as they come through, I can read them off.
Okay, sure.
Okay, are you guys putting them there? They're starting to come in.
Okay.
So it's just going to take me a minute to look at them. I just want to say how incredible that the Mexican Independence Day is occurring right outside the project when there's no independence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when I first started doing the project, one of the first pieces I did was an audio documentary, and it was just simply asking people around the jail to really talk about what it means to be in proximity to the jail. And I met I met people who said, my dad's locked up there, and he's a block away. I can't see him, right, all the time, but the fact that he's near me is at least, in his mind, at least he's somewhat close to his father, right? There were other people that said it stigmatized them, that growing up, they were always ashamed to say where they lived. I met people on the inside who were guards who grew up in the neighborhood, so I think it's important to kind of think about, just like immigrant detention centers, the ways in which these institutions get a group of people to rely on them, that sometimes you hear people say, well, it's a form of economic stability or something, right? It's like, well, there are other avenues, right? There's what other opportunities are we giving communities to be employed, you know, and to be to be employed. And so I think that it brought up just a lot of different issues and conflicts with the institution itself, and it helped just really propel the work, you know. I see a lot of questions, so.
Yeah. So many people are recognizing how close you came to when you were working with the inmates on the Radioactive Project. And I think somebody sums it up very well here. It says, the Radioactive Project was so powerful and influential to all those who were a part of it. It seemed to be very important to the inmates you worked with. Would you ever consider doing this again, or making this something they can look forward to every year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a very powerful experience. I think that as an artist, but also as somebody who teaches, you know, who very much cares about teaching and pedagogy, it was a really profound experience, you know, for me, and I think for the group. You know, there were moments when we dug deep into these projects and these artistic experiments, and it felt like we were in another dimension, you know, just getting into these really awesome, weird spaces that I think creativity kind of allows you to get into, but that only came through trust, you know, and through like building relationships. That it wasn't something that happened immediately. It just had to grow into that. And so I think these projects really take time, you know, and you know, I did a project in New Haven, Connecticut that was sort of along the same lines in terms of the kind of proximity between a community and a detention center, but it was an entirely different project, you know. And I think what makes this project unique is that, you know, I grew up in the neighborhood. I have relationships with many people there that are, you know, even before my birth, you know, people in my family who also are organizers in the area and that kind of helped me and who supported this project. So I'm not sure I can I don't think that's I can't recreate that. That's almost a very site specific project in many ways. I am working on a new project, but it's you know, because due to COVID and the jail has been a COVID hotspot, unfortunately, like many places of detention, I've had to kind of rework that project, and am in the process of figuring out what it's going to look like. But it will involve some of the ensemble members that are interested in continuing the work, but it's going to have a very different format, and it's likely going to be video. So I'm excited about what that'll look like. So, but you know, for me, it's just about following the trajectory, like following the work. You know, the work presents a set of issues, you respond, you know, you make decisions, it feels good, you make mistakes along the way, and then you keep following it. That's how I feel, is I'm just following the work and kind of seeing what the work, how it grows, and kind of respecting and honoring how it grows. And very much it's influenced by the context, you know.
That's great. Several people want to know about the process to gain entry into the jail, the preparation, certification, how many people were working on your team.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, thanks for, you know, not everybody asks that. And there's so much background work that goes into projects like this. I'm sure, you know, Castles told you about, you know, their process, which, you know, I can only imagine. But for a project like this, it, you know, I sort of think about, you know, I started that project in 2018 or 2017, I think. Yeah, I started in 2017, but I had been working at and around the jail since 2012. But even before 2012, I was working as a sort of doing some arts and culture organizing in that area since 2005. So, you know, I think that those relationships just were building, you know, on top of each other, and it enabled me to be able to create relationships with people that heard about the, you know, the project and said, you know, hey, this sounds interesting. I'm not an artist, but I'm a local community leader, so I can get you, a meeting with the sheriff's department. And that's how it began. It was a Cook County commissioner at the time who was from the neighborhood, who had led an organization for many years. And he was a big art supporter, heard about the project, and then got me and my collaborators a meeting with the sheriff's department. At the time, there was not a whole lot of clarity about what the work would look like, so it was a strange conversation because I had to sort of formulate it in such a way that was like, well, these are the things that we want, it should be public, it should be responding to, the issue of mass incarceration, all of these things. And then that led to a series of meetings with local justice organizers, juvenile justice organizers, aldermen, community organizations, public art organizations, and through many conversations like that then got us the green light to do this series of interventions on the outside of the jail initially, and that was several years. And then eventually they saw that we did some interesting work, and they then gave me the green light to go inside of the jail and do the workshops. I did have to get, a background check. There's lots of paperwork you have to sign. There's, one has to get an ID. Then I met with the programs coordinator of the jail, who's in charge of, she was in charge of just programs all across the jail. And then I told her about the project, and, at the time she was relatively new. So, it was sort of unheard of an artist coming in and bringing audio recorders, like audio recorders are a big, the people are worried about, like sheriff's departments are worried about people bringing in pencils, right? So recorders was this whole other thing. And so it just took some time to kind of tell them, well, it's important for the project, these are the supplies we need. And so one had to create a list, get everything approved, and we had to have everything accounted for. So for example, if I brought in 10 Zoom recorders, every piece of that equipment needed to be written out and accounted for. So everything had to be in like plastic bags, everything had to be in see-through material. If something was missing, then that would create a huge problem. And then we had to also really explain that to the ensemble, like, please, like, don't take a pencil, or don't take, because if something's missing, then, we may not be able to come back. And they understood that. I mean, they wanted us to return, right? So I remember one of the ensemble members was, the supplies collector, and he was like, where's that pencil? Just making sure. And, to be honest, like, as I mentioned earlier, people are yearning to do something, there's just nothing to do. There's nothing. Maybe there's a TV. The jail is a place of limbo. These are folks who 95% are awaiting trial. They have not been convicted, and so they're in this sort of limbo place, just waiting to go to court. So the value of having a creative tool at your disposal is like luxurious, and so we really understood that, and we just tried as much as possible to just have this agreement so that we can continue going and everything. And people were super respectful, and like that all worked out well. Sometimes we experienced some resentment. My collaborator and I tried to go into another division and work with the women that were locked up there, because there are some women that are locked up there, but it was almost impossible. We always had trouble getting into that division. There was always some kind of issue going on that didn't always feel like it just didn't always feel like they wanted us there, and I think it just had to do with a lot of things that probably also I don't even realize. One thing that you hear a lot about incarceration is that the men need the programs, or that the women have a lot of programs already and they don't need additional programs. You hear that a lot, and so it definitely made us realize the kind of the issues around gender inequity at places of incarceration. I mean, I know that women are one of the fastest growing, incarcerated populations. And so I think that's something we need to pay attention to. So that was really disappointing for us because we had really wanted to work with the women, but there was always some barrier that unfortunately did not allow us to get into that division. So I'm going off a little bit on a tangent, but I did want to mention that because I think that's important. But yeah, so it's basically just a lot of bureaucracy and relationship building, because the program's coordinator was somebody who really liked what we were doing, and I think she came from a psychology background and a therapy background, and I think she did express a lot of care for the ensemble and was really proud of what they were making. And so I think we were lucky to have found some people that worked inside of the institution that saw value in what we were doing and really enabled us to do this work. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Two-part question. The first part comes from an undergrad student who says, were there other mediums you worked with before you were interested in art, performance, art installation? And the second part of the question comes from Castles, who says, what inspired you to follow this form of performative and sculptural expression? Is there a certain level of abstraction that is portrayed through your craft that could not exist in a more 2D format? What attracted you to this medium to express your ideas in this way?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great set of questions. I started off doing murals. That was a big part of my life for a very long time. And for me, doing murals in Chicago, which is one of the places of the mural movement in the United States, was recognizing the potential of public monument and the way in which community members or neighbors can transform a public space of any kind, a building or a plaza, let's say, into a place that is meaningful, that is relevant, that is responsive to their story and their needs. And I always was drawn to that. I was just really kind of, I was always inspired by how artists can kind of, use DIY methods to just make something happen, to really create, do this sort of act of transformation. So to me, that was always powerful, to sort of see that. And so through kind of murals, that was an entry point for me. Eventually, though, I felt like it wasn't enough for me. I felt like I wanted to deal not with the surface. I wanted to deal with the physicality itself, right? That I want to deal with not just this building that has a surface to paint on. I want to deal with the building itself, the brick, the concrete, the way that, and it's not to sort of, yeah, I mean, it's really to think about the layers of power, the layers of history that a place has. And so for me, when the jail project started to kind of come to fruition, one of the requests from community folks was like, can you do a mural? Can you do a mural on the wall? And I felt really strongly at the time that would not do this place. That would not be enough of a sort of act of resistance. That in fact it might even sort of be complicit in something. And to me, it also felt like the use of sound and the body and performance and projection and all of these other mediums that we experimented with, they enable this opportunity for many people to participate in something, that somebody can participate in the storytelling, somebody can participate in the projecting of sound, that we did a project called Park, where people parked their car based on the racial demographics of the jail. So we got Black, brown, and white cars, and people just, put the volume up in their cars and let the sound move through their cars and out into the perimeter of the jail, So, I think I've always been interested in, you know, how, you know, through these various sort of time-based mediums that we can penetrate and make this space porous. You know, I'm almost like picturing a kind of, you know, haze or something moving through the space that that is maybe in a way a kind of spiritual act, you know, in some senses, you know, that feels even like you're transcending something. So I guess that's what I was thinking, and that's why I made that shift before that project. But I really wanted to kind of think about that more broadly. And to me, that is just that felt just more powerful, and that's just something I also felt like I wanted to grow into. Like I wanted to really take it there, and many people felt the same. So it was a really great direction, you know.
Excellent. We do have a comment from Rafa, who is viewing on YouTube. And it also connects with a student's question. The student is, I'll read this one first, is asking, how has your art most impacted your own personal growth? And Rafa, in a similar vein, is saying, Maria, your work is so of this moment, but also so ahead of its time in terms of how you've imagined and activated the life of and around Cook County Jail. I think your work has helped us arrive to this moment, along with the work of many movement builders, organizers, and abolitionists, to reimagine how we live with prisons in this country. What does this moment now feel like for you personally in relation to your past work and Cook County?
Oof, okay, Rafa, going there. Okay, how do I do this without crying? And there's nothing wrong with crying, but there's been so many tears, I feel like, lately. So for me, yeah, you know, I think that I've been thinking so much about, you know, abolition as a process, you know, that it is a process of, you know, evaluation, of critique, of practicing anti-racism in every aspect of our lives. And I've so much been thinking about so much of my role in these systems that I'm a part of, whether it's at my academic institution, whether it's in my family, whether it's, you know, in my city, right? And the ways in which, you know, these experiences and, you know, the way that I can contend with places of power just in every aspect of my life. And certainly I feel like this pandemic time has, you know, really highlighted this exponentially. And I think, you know, as a mother now, you know, I'm a mother to almost a 2-year-old, thinking so much about caretaking, you know. I have to take a moment. Yeah, just, you know, caretaking. How do we take care of each other, right? How do we care for each other, and who are we not taking care of, right? So you know, so really thinking about how we show up, you know, how we show up in every aspect, has been a big part of my own kind of lesson right now, you know. And you know, I think that people have been doing it in really powerful ways, and certainly like the folks that I've met through In Plain Sight and other kind of artists and people working towards social justice have been a great inspiration, you know. And I think that they're lessons that we're learning, and we should take them as opportunities, you know, that these are opportunities for us to do better, and to really, you know, take care of each other, and to really kind of show up for folks, because we are in a crisis, you know, we are in a true crisis. And rather than kind of letting this deplete us, that we can use it as an opportunity to really get strong and see this sort of power of the collective that is based in love and joy and hardship, but that there is a real true power in that, and I hope and I know that can help us move forward. Yeah, hope that answers your
Yeah, thank you so much. Do you feel up for a few other questions?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. But hearing your response, it does make me think of a question. I've lost it in here though, in the chat, but it was about how the audience experiences the project. We understand that you and your collaborators, both within the walls and without, have an incredible experience and transformation and understanding. What do you feel like the audience members, the people that were in the lawn chairs, what did you hear from them?
Yeah, let's see. I met a man who lived 2 blocks away from the jail, and he saw what we were doing and walked. He saw us testing the projection and said, "Oh, what are you guys doing?" And I told him, and he said, "Oh man, that's that, I've never heard of that before." And he said, "I spent time there, and I should not have spent time there." He had some issue with some police, and he was locked up there for a little while, and he talked about his experience there, and he ended up bringing his mom, and his mom showed up, and they just sat there and watched it, and he just talked about he just didn't see himself up there, that he never really was able to talk about the injustice he experienced, and that was for him a kind of way to just connect, and that to feel kind of a sense of empowerment, even though it was in a place that maybe takes power away. So that felt really good. But there were also others that felt like sometimes there were folks like, why are you doing it, right? Why are you working with people that are incarcerated? So there were also moments where there was a lot of resistance, but as much as possible, I just try to invite them to come and just to take a listen and to watch, that maybe if they just sat and watched and took this in, that they might even have a different perspective, and I think that's, the kind of lesson I learned in working in community, is that a community is not monolithic, right? It's highly complex. Everyone has a different position on it. People might have been victimized, right? And so they're coming from a place that is very personal, and that they're still kind of working through something. And so, as much as possible, I tried to create a space, and I think we're working hard at it, to just create a space where we can come and listen and watch and experience it in a way that gets to maybe the gut and the heart of our bodies, that maybe through that space we can kind of learn something, right?
Do you have some advice for young artists? I know that many of these projects involve more than just you, so maybe talking about collaboration, the challenges of that, but the benefits, etc.
Yeah, I think that if folks are interested in working collaboratively, one of the things I always tell students is, even if it's not your community per se, but you're genuinely interested in contributing or supporting, I think it's important to always meet people where they are, kind of really, that building a relationship takes time. It's not something you can quickly do, and that one has to really commit to that process, and that it may be bumpy, but relationships are bumpy. And that to me, it's about a contribution, the Cook County Jail is in my community. I grew up around there, but I have never been incarcerated, so I am an outsider in that perspective. And so what I tried to do, at least when I was doing Radioactive, is to sort of think about what I can offer, what people are interested in, what skills I have that others might find useful, and to kind of come in to this lens of contributor, to contributor to things that maybe people are thinking about or interested in. So you're not also kind of redoing something, right? That you are identifying, recognizing the work that has already happened, and then you want to contribute something to that space. So I think that's really important. So there's a certain amount of I think humbleness that is required, right? That and I think what I said earlier about communities are not monolithic, they don't agree, they're not one thing. And so I think that's always important to note, that there's a lot of different opinions within one community, and one needs to understand that, because I think it's easy to also kind of, easily sort of stereotype or create these misperceptions of a particular kind of place, I did see, maybe in one of the questions, I did see somebody was asking if the Radioactive Ensemble was selected. And I do want to just clarify that they were self-selected. So when, we went in to talk about what we were doing, we introduced a project to different divisions, and then we had basically a sign-up sheet. And the only requirement we had was that you had to be interested in art. So they didn't have to have any artistic experience. We just wanted like genuinely interested people. And that's how we identified the Radioactive group.
Great. We're coming up to about 10 minutes before 8. So just if there's any last things that you feel like you want to share with us that maybe we didn't touch on in the Q&A. You've been so generous and it's been wonderful. So I just want to give you one last word if you want one.
Oh, wow. The last word. Okay. No, I just, I'm grateful that you all are doing this series of talks. What a gift it is to, be able to engage in these conversations, and your questions are really incredible. I'm kind of reading through them quickly here. And I'm just really honored to be a part of the series. Thank you for having me, and thank you, Castles and Rafa, for doing such an amazing project, and that the project is still living on. That it didn't stop; it continues, which is really incredible. And so, thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. We've watched the sunset behind you tonight.
Oh. As part, that was I intended that to happen. So
beautiful.
Thank you. That was such a gorgeous presentation, and it was great to get the formal part, and so wonderful to have you respond in real time to those questions with such honesty and transparency and vulnerability. Real treat to be able to see your process too. The actual interfacing with all the layers of power. That's really fascinating, and I don't think something that we often get to see. So yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
All right, y'all. We'll see you next week.
Good night, Castle.
Good night, Holly. Good night, everybody. Take care.